Many people may not remember this incident that happened more than 10 years ago at the McDonough Township homes in the 90s. As some of you might remember vague details of the case where the mother was mentally unstable and stabbed her 2 young daughters that summer. The eldest son of that family was a classmate and close friend of mine. Everyone was heartbroken and saddened by the incident. We lived a few sections of townhomes away from them at the time and would play together after school during the summer. However, after the incident occurred, the neighborhood became quiet for a while, and then I stopped seeing my friend and his siblings around. About a week into all of this, I started to see and hear things in the middle of the night. My bedroom windows faced the parking lot on the 2nd floor. In front of our townhome is our small lawn and a short staircase that leads down to the sidewalk. We lived on the end of the section of townhomes. In fact, I still remember that light pole that stood on our corner that would flicker from time to time. But to get into some of the creepy things that happened here in this home, one of my first creepy encounters took place at about 3:45 a.m. one early morning. I remember the time because that was the usual time that my mom would be up getting ready for work, and she'd be out the door by about 4 a.m. As I laid there in my bed sleeping, I began to hear a coming from my window. I sat up, still half asleep, but managed to open one eye partially to see who it was making that tapping sound. Now, my windows were covered by very thin curtains. They were white but still see-through to a certain extent. From where I sat in bed, I noticed that there was a light shadow outlining a small child's hand at the window, illuminated from the light from the parking lot. But then, maybe my eyes were just playing tricks on me. Maybe it was just a shadow of the branch of the tree that sat in our front lawn. So I brushed it off and laid back down with my head on the pillow. And then, again, coming from my window. Curiosity got the better of me this time, so I got up on my feet and started walking towards the sound. As I got closer to the window, the hairs on my body started to stand up. And then I started to feel a cold chill running down my spine. I remember being scared as shit, but something was pulling me towards the window. I can't explain it, but it was like my body was in a trance as I gravitated in that direction. A few moments later, I then heard my mother calling me from a distance.
Hey, why are you up? It's 4 in the morning. Why are you just standing there like an idiot?
I turned around and saw my mother standing there in the doorway. She had the most confused look upon her face. And then me myself, not fully understanding what was happening, I just went back to bed and didn't question it much. The next morning was just like any other day. Everything was fine. It wasn't until I was back in bed that night that I started to hear things again. Like the night before, you guessed it. The tapping sound on my window had came back. And then, just like the previous night, I began to rub my eyes as I looked at the window to see what it was that was making that sound. This was all very deja vu, because it had happened right around the same time as well. I found myself doing the exact same thing. I sat up in my bed, looking into the direction of the window. This time, however, what I had seen was much more visible than the previous night. I could see clearly that there was a small child's arm with his or her hand balled up into a fist as they continued knocking on my window. But I was half asleep. Was I hallucinating? Was I losing my mind? I don't know. I was afraid, but being back in this trance-like state that I was in, my body was being pulled into that direction, whether I liked it or not. I just remember thinking to myself, why was there a child knocking at my window at this time of night?
Come out and play with us. We've been looking for you. But the dog by your door keeps barking at us, and we're too afraid to come near your front door.
I was a bit confused by this because we didn't own a dog. My parents weren't fond of animals, so we weren't allowed to have any pets. The little girl repeated,
Come on. Come outside and play with us. It's lonely and we can't go home anymore. Please. We just want to play. Just for a while.
and then the next thing I know, the little girl who was speaking to me appeared right in front of me, right at my window. She stared at me with a smile on her face. She then reached her hand, and even though my window was closed, she reached right through the glass and grabbed a hold of my left forearm. I let out a scream, but just as quickly as I did, my body went limp with sharp pains of chills. I felt hot, but cold at the same time. I felt the sweat coming down my face, but I was actually freezing. The pain that I felt was unbearable. It was as if there were 1,000 needles piercing throughout my entire body. And while all of this was happening, all I could hear in the background were the laughter of these two kids. After what felt like an eternity, I felt a warm sting on my right hand. I quickly then snapped my head around to see this giant black dog with its mouth wrapped around my arm, with blood dripping from its mouth. It was at that moment that I heard my mom yell out to me very loudly,
May, you're coming home now.
My eyes flung open, and I saw my mom standing next to me, and I was sleeping in my bed with the morning sunlight shining into my room. I slowly got up out of my bed, and I asked her,
Why are you not at work? And why am I in bed? I remember I was playing with my friend's little sisters that had died. They were just here, in my room. What happened?
My mom's reply was simple.
It's nothing. It was just a dream, okay? Don't think too much of it.
I answered with a okay, even though I really wasn't. As my mom walked out of my bedroom, I started to get out from under my blanket. As I raised my right arm to pull off the blanket, I noticed a red string tied around my wrist. It wasn't there before. I then lifted up my left arm and found fresh scratch marks on the inside of my forearm, as if someone had clawed directly into my skin and tissue. But ever since that night, my mom made my two younger sisters stay with me in my bedroom every night when it was time for bed. But it still feels like it was just yesterday when this incident took place.